The office hallways were always spotless, the floors gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Yet, no one noticed the man who made it that way. Daniel, the janitor, had been working there for over a year. Every morning, he arrived before anyone else, mopping, dusting, and making sure everything was in perfect order. By the time employees rushed in with their coffee cups and hurried footsteps, his presence faded into the background. But that didn't mean they ignored him. "Watch where you're mopping, old man," a young associate, Liam, scoffed one morning as he nearly slipped on the freshly cleaned floor. He laughed and high-fived his colleagues. Do something useful for once. Others joined in, rolling their eyes whenever Daniel passed by. To them, he was just the janitor, unimportant, invisible, not worth a second thought. The managers never acknowledged him, and employees treated him like he was in the way. Yet Daniel never reacted. He continued his work with quiet patience, keeping his head down and his expression unreadable. No one knew the truth. No one suspected what was coming. Days passed, and the teasing continued. Liam and his group made it a daily ritual to mock Daniel, leaving snide comments or calling him the invisible man. At lunch, they'd gather around the break room, laughing about how the janitor was probably going to clean the bathroom floors with his tears today. It never stopped, and it seemed like no one cared. But Daniel didn't flinch. He never once spoke up or fought back. His demeanor remained calm, almost too calm. The employees assumed he was either too tired to care or too humble to stand up for himself. What they didn't know was that Daniel wasn't just a janitor. He had been in the corporate world once, sitting in the same high-rise office where they worked now. He had once been a respected leader, a visionary in his field, until his company had faced a collapse. The same people who now laughed at him had once been his peers, and he had made the tough decision to step away, leaving it all behind. But he hadn't forgotten, and he hadn't given up. At night, after finishing his janitorial duties, Daniel would sit at his small apartment, studying the business world, reading market reports, company valuations, and leadership strategies. He knew what they didn't. Everything about their company, from the inside out. And soon, it would all change. One Thursday morning, things started to change. A rumor spread through the office. An unexpected announcement was coming. The executives were preparing for a big meeting. No one knew exactly what it was about, but the tension in the air was palpable. Daniel arrived early, as usual, pushing his cleaning cart along the hallway. But today, something felt different. There was a strange energy in the building, a hum of anticipation that hadn't been there before. He could hear snippets of hushed conversations in the break room as employees speculated on the announcement. "This company is falling apart," someone whispered. "They're bringing in a consultant to fix things, I bet." Liam, standing by the elevator, added, "Doesn't matter. They'll probably just fire half of us." He laughed, but his voice carried an edge of worry. Daniel ignored them, keeping his eyes focused on his work, though his mind was elsewhere. When the clock struck 10, the announcement came. The company's CEO, who had been with the company for over 2 decades, was stepping down. No one had seen it coming. "Effective immediately," the HR director said, her voice trembling slightly, "the new interim CEO will be..." There was a pause, a moment of silence. Everyone held their breath. Daniel Carver. The room fell into stunned silence. People looked around as if trying to find someone playing a prank. Daniel's name echoed through the air like an impossible dream. The janitor? The one they mocked every day? The one they barely acknowledged? The silence stretched on, thick with disbelief. Eyes darted from the HR director to Daniel, who stood quietly in the doorway, his mop and cleaning supplies forgotten at his side. He hadn't moved, his expression unreadable. The employees exchanged confused looks, as if expecting someone to burst into laughter or to hear the punchline of a joke. But no one did. Did we hear that right?" Liam finally asked, breaking the stillness. His voice sounded weak, uncertain. He looked around for confirmation, but no one had the answer. The HR director cleared her throat, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Yes, you heard correctly. Daniel Carver will be taking over as CEO, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like an impossible dream. Daniel, the janitor, the one they ridiculed, was now in charge. Liam's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His hands trembled as he clutched the edge of the table. Daniel's gaze swept across the room, taking in the wide-eyed stares, the disbelief, and the slowly rising panic among the workers. He felt a sense of calm wash over him, as if everything had led to this exact moment. The mockery, the dismissive comments, all of it had been a setup for this. "I'll need all department heads in my office in 30 minutes, Daniel said, his voice steady and strong, though it carried a hint of authority that no one had ever expected from him. "The rest of you, please return to your work." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving everyone behind in a whirlwind of confusion and shock. As Daniel made his way down the hall to his new office, he could hear hushed whispers and stunned conversations behind him. He didn't look back, though. His mind was already focused on the task ahead. The board had given him full access to the company's records, financial reports, and plans. His first priority was simple: restructure. In his office, he closed the door and sat at the large oak desk that now felt oddly familiar. The chair creaked beneath him, but it didn't unsettle him. He had spent years in boardrooms just like this one. Daniel's thoughts drifted to the employees, the ones who had mocked him, the ones who still couldn't wrap their minds around his sudden rise. He wondered how many would try to challenge him, to undermine him. It didn't matter. He would let his actions speak. An hour later, the department heads arrived, hesitant and unsure. One by one, they filed into his office, glancing nervously at each other. When the last person, the marketing director, entered and took a seat, Daniel wasted no time. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his tone sharp. "I know this is unexpected, but I'm here to turn things around. This company has been running on fumes for too long. Now it's time to make some hard decisions." He paused, watching their faces as they absorbed his words. "You all have been here for a reason," Daniel continued, his eyes meeting theirs. "But I'm sure you know there are problems we can't ignore anymore. From financial mismanagement to employee morale, everything needs to change." The room was quiet. The marketing director, who had often dismissed Daniel as nothing more than a custodian, now shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Starting today," Daniel said, "we're taking a new direction. There will be no more excuses, no more empty promises." He didn't need to say more. They understood. Outside the office, whispers started to swirl. The janitor had taken over, but they were beginning to realize that they had underestimated him. The first week under Daniel's leadership was nothing short of chaotic. Employees who had once seen him as invisible were now forced to confront him as their CEO. The shock hadn't worn off, and there was a lingering sense of tension in the air, like a storm was about to break. Liam, the young associate who had always been the loudest in mocking Daniel, was now in a corner whispering with his colleagues, his face pale. He had always seen Daniel as weak, easy to overlook, easy to push around. But now it was clear that his perception had been entirely wrong. Every decision Daniel made had a purpose. He made sweeping changes to the way the company operated, cutting unnecessary expenses, implementing stricter protocols, and focusing on what actually mattered: efficiency and growth. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He told people exactly what needed to be done, and anyone who wasn't up to the challenge was shown the door. It wasn't long before the rumors started. Some claimed Daniel was too harsh, that he was too quick to fire those who didn't meet his expectations. Others whispered that he was ruthless, determined to take control at any cost, but none of that mattered to him. The company was finally seeing real change. Then came the day when the board of directors requested another meeting. Daniel had no intention of making this another formality. The tension was thick as the directors gathered in the large conference room, their faces betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. When Daniel entered, they all stood, their movements stiff, as if they were still trying to figure out who this man was and why he now sat at the head of the table. "Please sit," Daniel said with authority. "We have a lot to discuss." The room settled, but the undercurrent of unease was impossible to ignore. "I'm not here to entertain your concerns," Daniel began, his voice even. "I'm here to lead this company back to success. And if anyone is uncomfortable with that, I suggest we have an honest conversation about it now." One of the directors, an older man who had always been skeptical of Daniel's rise, opened his mouth to speak, but Daniel cut him off before he could. "I already know what you're going to say," Daniel said, his gaze fixed. "You're going to ask about my experience in this industry, my qualifications to run a company of this size. But I have one thing none of you have: vision." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Daniel wasn't trying to charm them, he was laying down the truth. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he continued. "What I need is your support. If you're willing to give it, then let's make this company great again. If not, then I'll find a way to move forward without you." The room fell silent. No one dared to speak. The board remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Daniel's words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. He could feel the weight of their doubt, their hesitation. They had expected a janitor to back down, to apologize for his sudden rise and beg for their approval. But he wasn't going to do that. He was in charge now, and he intended to stay there. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity before one of the directors, a woman named Claire, spoke up. "I'll admit," she said slowly, "I didn't see this coming, but the results speak for themselves." She glanced around the table, meeting the eyes of the other directors. "Our quarterly numbers are already showing improvement. We're cutting costs, our morale is higher than it's been in months, and the employees are responding to his leadership." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but the older man, Robert, who had been the most vocal against Daniel's appointment, shook his head. "1 month does not make a successful CEO," he snapped, his voice harsh. "We need someone with real experience, not someone who—" "I don't need your approval," Daniel interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "What I need is for you to understand that this company is not here for your egos. It's here to succeed. If you're not willing to put that first, then we have a problem." There was a moment of stunned silence before Claire spoke again, her tone softer this time. "Let's give him a chance," she said, looking at Robert. "1 more month. We'll review the progress then." Daniel gave a nod, acknowledging her point. "Fine," he said simply. "But make no mistake, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for the future of this company." As the meeting ended and the board members filed out, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still there, but it was different now. They had seen Daniel's resolve. They had seen the change he was making, and despite their reservations, they couldn't deny the result. In the days that followed, Daniel's leadership continued to shake things up. He made tough decisions that others had been too afraid to make. He reorganized departments, streamlined processes, and prioritized what truly mattered. He wasn't just a janitor anymore, he was a force to be reckoned with. But it wasn't just about business, it was personal too. He knew the employees who had mocked him were starting to notice. The whispers in the hallways had shifted from disbelief to curiosity, then to respect. And that, for Daniel, was the sweetest victory. As the weeks passed, Daniel's leadership continued to deliver results. Morale improved. The company's financial outlook was looking brighter than it had in years, and even the most skeptical employees had begun to come around. He was no longer seen as the janitor. He was the man who saved the company. But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, a crisis hit. A major client, one of the company's largest and most lucrative accounts, was on the brink of leaving. They had been unhappy with the company's performance and had begun exploring other options. Daniel knew that losing this account would be a blow that the company couldn't recover from. It would be a devastating blow to his already fragile reputation, and it would send a message to everyone who doubted his ability to lead. He called a meeting with the sales team, the marketing department, and a few key executives. They had to come up with a solution, and fast. "You all know how important this account is," Daniel said, his voice steady but urgent. "We need to act quickly, or we lose them for good. I don't care about the politics, the egos, or the past mistakes. What I care about is fixing this. Now." The room was tense, but everyone could feel the gravity of the situation. The team worked for hours, brainstorming ideas, crafting solutions, and figuring out what went wrong in the first place. Daniel didn't lead from the front in the traditional sense. He led by listening, by guiding them to the right answers, without giving them all the solutions himself. Finally, they came up with a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best they could do under pressure. Daniel sent it over to the client himself, not relying on anyone else to do the job. He needed them to see him, to know that he was willing to take responsibility and do whatever it took to make things right. The next day, they received the email that would change everything. The client was staying. They were impressed with the personal touch, the quick response, and the sincerity of the company's efforts. They saw a renewed commitment to quality and customer service. They had been prepared to walk away, but now they felt confident that this company, and Daniel, was worth sticking with. When Daniel received the news, he allowed himself a rare moment of relief. But that feeling didn't last long. He knew there was still so much work to do, and now, more than ever, he had proven to everyone, including himself, that he was more than just a janitor. He was a leader. As the news spread through the office, the whispers began again. But this time, they weren't mocking. This time, they were filled with awe. Daniel Carver wasn't just the janitor who took over the company. He was the man who had saved it. With the client secured, Daniel's position within the company was no longer just secure. It was cemented. The board, which had once doubted him, now came to him for advice. The employees who had mocked him started to look at him with newfound respect, unsure of how to treat the man who had turned their company around. Liam, the most vocal of Daniel's detractors, was the first to approach him. It was late one afternoon, and Daniel was in his office, reviewing reports when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Daniel called. Liam stepped into the room, his shoulders slumped, a mixture of humility and guilt written across his face. He cleared his throat before speaking. Daniel," Liam began awkwardly, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything." Daniel raised an eyebrow, not expecting this. Liam had been one of the worst, often making cruel jokes about him. The sudden shift in his tone caught him off guard. "I didn't realize who you were," Liam continued. I had no idea what you were capable of. I thought you were just some guy cleaning up after us. But I see now, I see what you've done. You've changed everything." Daniel nodded slowly, but didn't say anything right away. "I've been watching the way you work, how you handle things, and honestly, I don't know how you do it. You've got this whole company in your hands now, and you make it look so easy." Liam paused, looking down at the floor for a moment before meeting Daniel's gaze again. "I was wrong about you." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping on the desk as he considered the young man in front of him. "You're not the first one," Daniel said quietly. "But that's all right. People need time to see the bigger picture." Liam nodded, a sense of respect beginning to settle between them. "Well, I just wanted to let you know that I see it now." "Thank you," Daniel replied simply. "Now, let's focus on moving forward." It was a moment of reconciliation, but it was also a reminder of how far Daniel had come. The journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would always be challenges ahead, always new obstacles to face. But Daniel knew one thing for sure: he was no longer invisible. As the weeks passed, the changes continued. The company flourished under Daniel's leadership, and the employees who had once ignored him began to come to him for guidance, for support. His reputation as a quiet, unassuming janitor had been replaced by something much more powerful, that of a man who had taken control of his destiny and transformed a company from the inside out. In the end, it wasn't just the company that changed, it was everyone in it. They learned to never judge someone based on their role or appearance. They learned that real leadership wasn't about titles or positions, it was about vision, determination, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. Daniel had started as a janitor, the one people overlooked. Now he was the man they couldn't ignore. And no one, least of all him, would ever forget the lesson he had taught them all. Daniel's rise from janitor to CEO had been swift and unexpected, but it had not been without its challenges. The employees had finally accepted him, and his decisions were beginning to show their impact. But even with all the progress, there was still one lingering question. Would he be able to sustain the success, or would the pressure eventually break him? It was the beginning of the third quarter when the true test arrived. A rival company, once a small competitor, had grown rapidly and was now threatening to take over the industry. They had a sleek marketing campaign, a trendy new product, and a vision that seemed to resonate with the public. Daniel knew the stakes were higher than ever. The company had made progress, but they were not yet invincible. If they didn't react quickly, they could lose everything. He called a meeting with the entire leadership team. As they gathered in the conference room, the tension was palpable. Everyone could feel the weight of the situation. "We're facing a threat that we can't ignore," Daniel began, looking around the room. "But we've been here before. We've overcome challenges, and now we need to do it again." The team members exchanged nervous glances, but Daniel's calm, determined demeanor helped steady their nerves. "We need to innovate," he continued. "We need to show the world that we can still lead, that we can be the ones pushing the envelope. The time for hesitation is over." The team worked tirelessly over the next few weeks, brainstorming new ideas, refining their products, and revamping their marketing strategies. The company began to take on a new energy, one that reflected Daniel's vision of a company that wasn't afraid to take risks and make bold moves. When the new campaign launched, it was like a breath of fresh air. The company's website was redesigned, the product line expanded, and a new ad campaign went live, showcasing the company's renewed commitment to quality and innovation. Within a month, the response was overwhelming. The public took notice. Sales began to rise, and the rival company's momentum stalled. The market, it seemed, was finally taking notice of the company that Daniel had rebuilt. As the months passed, the competitors grew weaker, and Daniel's company grew stronger. It wasn't just the employees who had changed, it was the entire corporate culture. People were no longer afraid to take risks. They weren't afraid to fail, because they knew that with Daniel at the helm, failure wasn't the end. It was a step towards something greater. It was a year to the day since Daniel had taken over the company, and as he sat in his office looking out over the city, he reflected on everything that had happened. He had proven himself, not only to the people who had doubted him, but to himself as well. His phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was an email from the board of directors. They were calling a special meeting. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Were they finally going to let him go? Was his time at the top over? He walked into the meeting room, unsure of what to expect. The board members were all seated, their faces unreadable. "Daniel," the lead director began, "we wanted to let you know how pleased we are with everything you've accomplished. The company is in the best shape it's been in years, and that's thanks to you." Daniel's pulse quickened, but he stayed calm, waiting for the next words. "We've been discussing your future with the company," the director continued, "and after much consideration, we've come to a decision." Daniel held his breath. "We want you to remain as CEO, permanently." The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Daniel couldn't help but smile. This was it. This was the moment he had worked for. The moment he had dreamed of. It wasn't just about the title. It was about what it meant. It meant he had earned the respect he deserved. It meant that, against all odds, he had proven that anyone, no matter where they started, could rise to the top if they were willing to fight for it. As the meeting wrapped up, Daniel looked around the table at the faces of the board members. The people who had once doubted him now stood behind him, confident in his ability to lead. It was a bittersweet feeling. He had come so far, but it had cost him something. It had cost him the life he had once known. It had cost him the comfort of being invisible. But Daniel knew one thing for sure. He would never be underestimated again. And with that, the story of Daniel Carver, the janitor who took over the company, came to a close. But his journey was far from over. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story and felt as inspired as I did while telling it. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps support the channel and allows us to keep creating more exciting content for you. If you want to see more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to comment below with what you think, or if you have any ideas for future stories. Lastly, if you think someone else would enjoy this story, please share it with them. Let's grow this amazing community together. Thanks again for your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.